Hey everyone, this is Matt. I've been working with Tim from Snipe Air Industries to hopefully bring to market the first that we know of, at least, seat riser kit for the 2019 and up Hobie Outback. Let's get started. So if you own an Outback 2019 and up, which if you're watching this video, it's probably safe to assume that you probably do, you know that the seat installation, just the stock seat installation, is pretty unique as far as kayak seats goes. You know, it has the kickstands in the back with the molded in little rest, and then for the front it has that riser bar that's very adjustable. However, it's pretty complicated the way it goes together. Because of all that, the seat rise required a pretty unique solution. So after looking around online, seeing what a couple other guys had done, I kind of took their concepts and combined a couple other things and ran with it. What I ended up coming up with was a design that I put together and 3D printed that ended up being really solid. The only problem with it was for the rear risers, to print them on my 3D printer and to get the quality that I wanted, it took about 10 or 12 hours each. So sorry for the road noise, I'm right next to my driveway. So it took about 10 or 12 hours each, so close to a full day to print a set of these. Then for the front, I used some plate aluminum, some 663 aluminum C-channel. I put them on together. It worked really well. I was on it for a few weeks. It's super solid. It's great for standing up a lot easier. It's nice to have that extra height while you're sitting down for visibility. And just a lot more comfortable of a pedaling experience on the kayak. My feet didn't fall asleep anymore on long runs. It just worked out really great. So took a bunch of pictures of it, wrote up a post on Facebook and shared it to a couple of Outback pages, and the response was huge. I had close to 100 comments between the two posts. Easily 30 or 40 people would individually message me, ask me if I could make them one, so on and so forth. But because of the long printing times that I was having with the rear risers, just to be able to get the quality, it just wasn't feasible for me. So Tim from Snipe Air Industries reached out to me and actually offered to mill these for me out of HDPE, which is basically plastic cutting board material. It's super strong, super UV resistant, and it holds up to wear and tear really well. If you've got any of those other products, you know what I'm talking about. He actually offered to mill them for me, and I said, well, why don't we just do it through Snipe Air and release it as one of your products. So I've been working with him, and what we've come up with is this kit. So we got the two 6063 aluminum risers in the front, which he's actually cutting on one of his table mills. These are just spray painted for now. The actual production run will be powder coated black, so you won't have all this chipping that I have right now. I've been pretty rough on these. You have a seat lanyard extension for the rear, so you can still lanyard your seat in. So if you flip your kayak, you won't lose your seat just because you put a seat raise on it. You got the two rear risers, which are actually two pieces of that HDPE material that are bolted together. It's super solid. There's the left and right are actually specific because a lot of people don't know this. There's a slight difference, like less than 3/16 of an inch difference between the height on the left and the right. And that's pretty much it. Obviously you've got all your hardware. You've got two cap screws, two nylock nuts, and a couple washers for the front, and then two 10/32 Phillips screws for the rear, and that's what holds those into place. All right, so let's get started with the install. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is remove your seat, but before you do that, go ahead and adjust your seat to where it's about, obviously to adjust it, you pull that your lever up here, and you can move it and slide it up or down. Go ahead and adjust it to where it's just under halfway up from the bottom of it. That'll make removing these brackets a lot easier here in a little bit. Obviously, unclip your stock lanyard, pull your seat forward, and lift it out. All right, let's go ahead and start with the easiest part of the installation. Just go ahead and clip your seat lanyard in. That way it's ready to go for when you install your seat back in. So like I was saying a minute ago, the height from the left to the right side, from this little ledge right here down to where the insert is actually slightly different. I mean, just by a hair, but it was enough that we actually designed a left and a right side, so you can see that one side is actually taller than the other. Now the taller one was going to go on your left side of your kayak, and the shorter one is going to go on the right side. And the only thing that holds it in there, which has been plenty so far, I've been using this kit for a couple of months now. I've tested it pretty well. Doesn't seem to be any wobble or anything like that. Just drop your screw in. See it, you got plenty of threads showing on the bottom. Get your screwdriver in there, set it right down. Just snug it up pretty good. Doesn't have to be super tight. It hangs in there pretty well because most of the weight is right there on that ledge. Do the same thing with the right side. I found it's a lot easier to get the screwdriver in your screw before you actually set it down in there. Just put it in there all at once. Just snug it up really good. And both those are in there super solid. Now we got 2 out of 3 parts of our seat riser install put in, but those are definitely the easiest parts of it. Let's go ahead and move on to the front. So now for the slightly more difficult and time consuming part, we're gonna get these 2 sides right here raised up about 3 inches using our aluminum plates. The order that you do this is pretty important. There's a couple different ways to do it, but this is the way that is probably most user-friendly for everyone out there. So there are 2 screws that hold both of these front bar mounts into each side. They're just socket cap screws. There's that 3/16 apex that you'll use to get them out. There's also a metal plate on this side that it's what this bar right here, your riser bar, your seat bar actually locks into. We'll remove those in a minute. The first thing you have to do though is remove 3 out of 4 of those socket cap screws. So you can actually move this bar up and down. If you grab this little ring right here, it'll toggle over and unlock that bar. And with your other hand, you can just spin your bar down to access all those. We'll go ahead and lower our bar back down. And the first thing we're gonna do is remove the top screw on either side. So we'll go ahead and get those out. Don't drop your screws. We're going to set those safely over to the side. And we're going to raise our bar back up so we can access the 2 on the bottom screws. The third one you're going to do is the bottom one on the right side, okay? And that'll come loose pretty easily, but it's still kind of wedged in there. So the next thing we have to do is there's 2 Phillips screws that hold this metal plate in place. So we'll go ahead and remove those 2 screws. Yeah, we'll remove those 2 screws, and then that'll loosen that plate up. You won't be able to remove it yet. And then the last thing we'll do is remove that bottom socket cap screw. So go ahead and get these Phillips screws out of here. It'll cooperate. All right, and we'll lower our bar back down, which is kind of tricky because the whole right side is loose, but just gotta be patient with it. Put a little pressure on it, lower it down. Get that top screw out, your top Phillips screw. And they're kind of deep in there, so I'm using just a pair of forceps that I use for getting hooks out of fish's mouth. And then we will raise it up one more time, just enough to where we can access that bottom socket cap screw with our drill. Once that's loose, it's still going to be captive, but you'll be able to lift the whole thing out at this point. And it's kind of spring loaded a little bit and pops out. You hear, if you've heard that fall, that's the nylock nut that's actually captive on the back side of this side. That's what one of those Phillips screws comes in. There's actually two of them back there, so make sure you don't lose them. So on the right side, there's some kayaks have them, some kayaks have two, some kayaks just have one, some don't have any. I haven't personally seen any that don't have any of these shims, but we actually don't need these for the installation. So you can go ahead and set those to the side and put them away in a safe place just in case you want to revert your kayak back to stock one day. So let's see where we are at. We have 4 longer socket cap screws, which is what the kayak came with. And then we have the rest of our hardware from the Snipe Air Industries kit. So these 4 screws that we just took out, those are actually going to go back in the same exact places. The only difference is we're going to install those aluminum risers, and these whole mounts are going to just go up basically 1 screw hole. So for that top screw hole, what we have is a couple of smaller socket cap screws, 2 nylock nuts, and a couple of washers. So now instead of the 4 pieces of hardware, we just have this in addition to it. So there's a couple ways to go about this. The easiest way I found is to just go ahead and install one of these screws on the bottom insert on the left side specifically. Just get it kind of snug. It doesn't have to be tight or anything, not even hardly hand tight. And then we'll go ahead and get our left side seat mount into place. Now, remember what I said about those nylock nuts on the back of this? There's molded in recesses for the back of this that those Phillips screws are going to screw in to secure that metal plate in there. So before you put this in place, make sure your nylon lock nuts are in the back of that. Then you can just kind of mock it up there. Yep, see, there goes one falling out already. And same thing with this side. We're just gonna kind of hand tighten it in there and just get it in place. Which you have to have your metal plate out of the way to do that. Like I said, I wouldn't tighten anything down with a drill or with a ratchet just yet. That's just barely tight in there. Now you're gonna put your metal plate back in. And make sure when you're doing this, there's this little tab on the metal plate. That goes down. That's what keeps your seat from going down too far. Go ahead and get these Phillips screws started back in here. And for these, you can actually go ahead and tighten them down. Oh, and there's an airplane coming. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. Sorry, folks. When you live 2 miles from an Air Force base, airplane noise is going to be an issue sometimes. All right, so we'll go ahead and get our second Phillips screw back in there. And like I said, you can go ahead and tighten these down because they won't get in the way. Hex head screws and go ahead and just start that bottom screw in there. Said I wouldn't even get it super tight or anything yet. You'll need a little bit of wiggle room here in a minute. Now the way this whole thing goes is obviously this little gear right here rolls on this track on the aft side, on the back side of these plastic mounts that come with your kayak. The way I've found it usually works best is to go ahead and set this side in here. Go ahead and set that side in there to where it's in its highest position, and you'll feel it to where it can't move up and down. That's because this little metal bar right here is locked into the top hole of that metal bracket. You want to make sure, you can see one side of this is flat, one side of it's round right here. Make sure the round side is up. Go ahead and just kind of set it in there, and you'll feel it, like I said, lock in, and it'll just kind of hang out there. Now let me move the camera around to the other side so we can actually see here. All right, so just flip the camera to the other side so you guys can kind of see. So for the other side, for the right side, you want to make sure these tracks are on the back side, facing the back of the kayak, just like the other side. And because we left all the hardware somewhat loose, we have a little bit of wiggle room, and everything can kind of flex a little bit. So you want to make sure your rounded side of this spinning mount right here is up, and then you're gonna take your mount and put it, make sure you have it as high as it'll go into those teeth. That little gear right there, make sure it's in the highest position that it'll go in those teeth. Just kind of move it over to the side, flex it up a little bit, and then just lower it right down into place. From there, you can go ahead and secure your bottom screw on this side, which I guess technically now is your middle screw. Sometimes it'll take a minute to find the hole, but we'll get there eventually. There it is. Like I said, just keep everything just kind of finger tight for now. Snug up this side just a little bit more. All right, now that we've got the bottom and middle screw kind of hand tight on both sides, the only thing we have left to do is install the screws on the top. But to do that, we have to lower this bar back down. Because the hardware's still all a little loose, this can be a little tricky. Sometimes it'll slide on you, but just pull this lock ring back again. You can just spin your mount down. You just have to spin it down enough to where you can access those top screw holes. This is where you're going to need your 7/16 wrench when we tighten everything down. But again, I'm just going to hand tighten everything just for right now before we get everything lined up. Washer on there, and our nylon lock nut. Go ahead and grab our wrench and chuck our drill in. We'll go ahead and hit our bottom ones up on either side since they're easy to get to. And last thing we got to do, we'll go ahead and raise our bar back up. That way we can get to our middle cap screws in there. Alright folks, that is it. We got our two mounts in the back, we got our seat lanyard extension installed, and we got our two aluminum risers installed in the front. It should be, like I said, about 1.5 inches in the back, 3 inches in the front. The only thing we have left to do is get our seat back in here, line line up those mounts. Lock it into place, make sure it locked in on both sides. We'll set our kickstands down into place, clip it in, and that is it. As you can see, it's definitely a lot higher. I'll get the camera off the tripod and give you guys a little video walkthrough over. You can tell there's a ton of storage space under the ground now. I've been keeping all my soft plastics under there. Some just extra odds and ends like sunscreen and stuff like that. Like we said, your kickstands are just gonna sit right, pardon my straps from my kayak cushion. Your kickstands are gonna sit right on those mounts right there. You can use it with the kickstands up or down. And that is pretty much it. Thanks to Tim again from Snipe Air Industries for helping me make this come true, and I hope you guys get a hold of yourselves a kit and enjoy our new product. So thanks a lot.